Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Casten, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material into the record.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, families across America are struggling with ever-increasing energy prices. In the last year, electricity prices have soared, increasing by 13% under the Trump administration. Utility bills overall have increased at double the rate of inflation. We all know what's driving those increases. We got soaring demand from data centers and other loads, rising prices for natural gas, and much-needed repairs to the grid that have been put off for years. Those are all tangible, identifiable causes of these price increases. But at the center of it all is one really simple reason. American energy policy has always put producers first and families second. You might think that in a democracy, the fact that there are more consumers than producers would cause the reverse, but in fact, for far too long, we have pursued an energy system with a single goal: make sure that oil and gas and coal companies keep their profits as high as possible. We've pushed the most expensive, dirtiest forms of energy on Americans because that's what's helped producers. And the Trump administration has done everything they can to curb the rise of more competitive renewable energy. You hear a lot about how the Trump administration hates clean energy, but that's not true. They don't hate clean energy, they hate affordable energy. But there's some good news. We got a plan to fix it. And I'm here today because of the Energy Bills Relief Act, a consumer-focused, family-first approach to American energy policy. Renewable energy is the fastest, lowest cost, most affordable way to meet rising demand. Right now, there are bottlenecks in the system that prevent renewable energy from getting from where it's generated to where it can be used. Our Energy Bills Relief Act removes the red tape. It makes sure that we can build our domestic energy supply so that we keep your beer cold, your showers hot, and lower your bills at the same time. Now, to do that, we're also going to have to modernize our electric grid and increase capacity by providing much-needed overdue upgrades using the latest technology. We're starting to fall behind other countries, which means that those costs could rise even further if we don't act. But we got time. We got time to catch up, and the Energy Bills Relief Act helps us to do it. And with that, I would now like to yield to my good friend and partner in good trouble on this bill, Congressman Levin from California.
I thank my friend from Illinois. It's an honor to work with you on this bill and many other things. Mr. Speaker, last night in this very chamber, the President declared that America is in a golden age. He said energy prices were plummeting. He said we're winning so much that we don't know what to do about so much winning. He celebrated record fossil fuel production and assured the American people that drilling alone is delivering affordability. He dismissed clean energy as a scam and suggested that the path forward is simply to double down on the past. I agree that every one of us should want America to be strong, prosperous, and secure. But the real test of any energy policy is not what sounds good in a televised address. It's whether working families feel relief when they open their utility statements. It's whether small businesses can forecast stable costs. It's whether seniors on fixed incomes are insulated from volatility rather than exposed to it. Families don't experience energy affordability through slogans. They experience it through monthly statements. And electricity costs are up 13%, and residential gas prices are up nearly 60% across the country. 1 in 6 households is now behind on their electric or gas bills. Families are paying more to heat and cool their homes, more to keep the lights on, and more just to get through the month. For millions of Americans already stretched thin, this is yet another bill they can't afford. And this comes despite the President promising on the campaign trail to cut energy bills by 50%. It's not just a broken promise on costs. It's a strategic failure at a defining moment for America's economic future. We are living through the most important global energy transition since the Industrial Revolution. The countries that deploy clean energy the fastest are lowering costs, strengthening domestic manufacturing, and securing control over the energy supply chains that will define economic power for decades. This is the moment when the winners of the global energy race are being decided. But instead of leading, the United States is being pulled backward. Over the past year, more than 165,000 clean energy jobs have been wiped out or delayed. Projects capable of powering roughly 13 million homes have been canceled or frozen. Clean energy tax credits are under attack. Grants have been rescinded. Permitting for wind and solar has been effectively paused. Billions in private investment sitting idle because federal policy has injected uncertainty into the marketplace. And at the same time, the administration is doubling down on fossil fuel policies that leave families exposed to volatile global markets and rising prices. So let's be honest about what's happening. Families are paying more because this administration is choking off the supply of clean, low-cost electricity while forcing ratepayers to subsidize aging, expensive fossil fuel plants. It's not ideology, it's math. It's math. If we are serious about affordability, truly serious, we must ask a different question. Not how much can we drill, but rather how do we build an energy system that delivers stable, low-cost power for decades? The truth, and it's a truth grounded in financial analysis, not political branding, is that clean energy is the lowest cost new electricity in the United States. Wind and solar, on an unsubsidized basis, undercut new coal and frequently undercut new natural gas generation. Utilities choose clean not because of ideology, but because they're the least expensive options available to meet demand. Now, that isn't to say that I disagreed with everything the President had to say last night. In fact, I was genuinely pleased that he acknowledged the pressure that data centers are placing on our electric grid. The explosion of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and advanced manufacturing is real, and it's transforming our economy, and it's driving electricity demand upward at a pace we haven't seen in decades. Ignoring that reality would be irresponsible, and confronting it is necessary. Now, the President suggested that tech companies should build their own power plants so household rates don't rise, and at its core, I think that intention is correct. Ratepayers should not be forced to subsidize infrastructure built to serve trillion-dollar tech companies. Families living on fixed incomes shouldn't be forced to underwrite private server farms for big tech. Small businesses shouldn't be absorbing the transmission costs created by hyperscale expansion. And protecting consumers must be the starting principle. But the correct intentions of the President aren't enough. We need statutory guardrails so that utilities can socialize grid upgrade costs across all customers. Without clear cost allocation rules, transmission investments triggered by large new loads can be spread broadly rather than assigned to the source of the demand. Without modernized planning, the infrastructure required for rapid load growth can crowd out other investments and create bottlenecks that ultimately drive rates higher for everyone. And there's another layer to this. Even if data centers build dedicated generation, as the President discussed last night, the broader grid still absorbs the consequences of rising demand. If demand rises and the cheapest new resources are constrained, prices rise for everybody. If transmission is insufficient, congestion increases and wholesale prices spike for everybody. If fossil fuel generation continues to dominate, the corresponding volatility is transmitted directly into higher retail electric bills for everybody. In sum, if we restrict the cheapest sources of new electricity while demand rises, prices are going to go up. That's not ideological. It's just supply and demand. If we slow the deployment of the lowest cost wind and solar, if we delay transmission build-out, if we limit storage, then the system will rely more heavily on higher cost generation, and consumers are going to pay the difference. If, on the other hand, we modernize the grid, we deploy the lowest cost resources at scale, we accelerate transmission expansion, we integrate storage, we allow clean energy to compete fairly and fully, then rising demand can be met with falling costs and less volatility. Infrastructure will be built more intelligently, enhancing reliability rather than undermining reliability. Again, this is not ideology. It's math. It's common sense. So today, along with my friend from Illinois, Mr. Casten, with whom I'm so proud to work, we are embarking on really a new path forward, the Energy Bills Relief Act. This is all about math, and it's all about common sense. It's all about how electricity markets actually function. It's all about the need for grid modernization as an economic imperative. It's all about fairness in who pays the bill for the modernized electric grid. It's all about protecting ratepayers with enforceable policy rather than with empty statements. Because the American people deserve more than rhetoric. They deserve a system built on data and durability. They deserve leadership that understands that affordability is engineered, not declared, and they deserve lower bills. And the path to lower bills runs directly through the clean energy deployment that markets are already telling us is the cheapest way forward. That's why we're here today, and that is what the Energy Bills Relief Act is designed to deliver. Thank you, and I'll yield back to the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Congressman Levin. So I want to take a little bit of personal privilege here and tell you a little bit about Mike and I's background. Mike and I both came into Congress in 2018. Prior to that, we were both in the clean energy industry. I think it's safe to say that prior to the election of Donald Trump in 2016, neither of us thought that our paths involved eventually getting to Congress or certainly being in this moment here right now. I say that because both of us spent our careers before getting into Congress building and deploying clean energy, building and deploying low-cost, affordable energy. And if you are going to go and build one of those plants, you build the plant, you hook it up, you connect it to the grid, and the person who now is controlling the dispatch of that plant never runs it unless it's cheaper than the electric grid. Every minute you own a solar panel, every minute you own a cogeneration plant, a wind turbine, all these technologies are out there, every minute you're saying, is this cheaper or more expensive than the alternative? And there's a saying, back in the days when I was going and doing all that, that asking for a utility for permission to interconnect to the grid is like asking a man for permission to date his wife. It doesn't matter whether you're cheaper. It doesn't matter whether that's in the national interest. You are a competitive threat. And capitalism works on competition. So fast forward, Mike and I run for Congress. We win. Speaker Pelosi appoints us both to the Climate Committee to put us, along with our wonderful leader, Kathy Casten, to figure out how to take this knowledge and make sure that we can deploy cheaper, cleaner energy. That work through the 116th Congress, through the 117th Congress, ultimately led to the Inflation Reduction Act. And in 2022, we passed the largest climate bill in the history of this country, in the history of the world. The purpose of that bill was to make sure that your access to cheap energy was not a function of whether you had capital, whether you could hire the lawyers and the engineers to go and to fight with your utility. It was to make sure that every American had access to the cheapest energy. And that bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, took a significant step forward in expanding access to cleaner, more affordable energy sources to lower costs for all Americans. I was really proud of the work we did to help write that bill, and then President Trump killed it. Now, killing it didn't prevent all those generators that got built from operating, because if you've got a solar panel on your roof, it's still cheaper than whatever anybody else is providing. But it blocks new people's ability to bring those forward. Last summer, he gutted programs that were designed to boost domestic renewable energy. He slashed incentives to help households save money. He arbitrarily blocked the development of affordable energy sources while forcing more expensive coal plants to keep running, ensuring that fossil fuel companies can keep raking in profits at your expense. The Energy Bills Relief Act puts an end to that. This is a consumer-focused bill. It's a bill that puts American families first. It restores the tax credits for home energy upgrades that were ended by President Trump. It incentivizes utilities to help consumers save money by funding home weatherization, energy efficiency. Wouldn't you like to spend less on your natural gas bill? Wouldn't you like your utility to be a partner in that? It provides financial assistance to make sure that families don't have their power shut off. It puts an end to price gouging because utilities shouldn't profit while you're struggling. It makes sure that places like data centers cover their own costs, and if a data center opens in your area, that doesn't mean that the costs are pushed onto your household. It gives a voice to the American people. Make sure they're consulted when new energy projects are being developed in their community. This bill was put together in a way that I wish was not so innovative. A lot of bills around here start by saying, what is politically possible? What can we do on a bipartisan basis? Well, if what's scientifically necessary exceeds what's politically possible, then we are failing in any ability to claim to be a leader. So what we did in this bill is says, what is the energy policy that's necessary? What's the energy policy that is most helpful to American consumers? That's what we set out to do. And I'm proud of the legislation that Congressman Levin and I have written to do that. And with that, I will yield back to the great gentleman from California, Mr. Levin.
I thank my friend from Illinois, and I'd like to just spell out some basic facts and some myths about clean energy, because there's a whole lot of misinformation out there these days. First thing I'd like to make sure to say is that clean energy is the lowest cost new electricity in America. Independent financial analysis confirms that utility-scale solar and onshore wind are the cheapest forms of new electricity generation available in the United States. This is from Lazard, their levelized cost of energy analysis, showing that unsubsidized solar and wind consistently undercut new coal and new natural gas generation. There was recently a report that solar projects are on average 41% cheaper than the lowest cost fossil fuel alternatives globally, and onshore wind projects are 53% cheaper. Another analysis shows that solar is approximately $64 per megawatt hour cheaper than coal and $20 cheaper than combined cycle gas. Wind is $61 cheaper than coal and $17 cheaper than gas. Markets are already choosing clean energy because it's the least expensive option. In fact, states leading in renewable generation generally see lower electricity prices. According to EIA data, 17 of 22 states with above average shares of wind and solar had below average electricity prices last year. 13 of those states voted Republican in 2024, I might add. And another analysis showed that the 4 states with the highest renewable generation saw prices fall in 2025. Well, 9 of the 10 states with the lowest renewable energy penetration saw prices rise. This isn't that hard. The cheapest, most affordable energy is the cleanest energy. And yet, instead of expanding that supply, the administration chooses to restrict it. The second thing I want to talk about is coal and market distortion. At the same time that clean energy deployment is being obstructed, this Department of Energy has issued emergency orders forcing aging coal plants to remain online. In Colorado, for example, that decision is estimated to cost ratepayers $20 million over 90 days, roughly $85 million annually, and potentially up to $150 million per year if required to operate continuously. In Michigan, ratepayers paid approximately $80 million over 4 months to keep a coal plant running. If coal were the lowest cost option, it would not need these sorts of emergency orders. 99% of U.S. coal plants are more expensive to operate than replacing them with new wind or solar, according to Energy Innovation. Coal is aging, it's unreliable, it's costly, and more than half the fleet is already scheduled to retire. NERC reliability data shows increasing forced outage rates for coal plants in recent years. So, folks, this is not free market competition. This is protectionism for expensive incumbents while families are footing the bill. The third thing I'd like to talk about is reliability. Opponents sometimes argue that wind and solar are unreliable. The evidence says exactly the opposite. Battery storage deployment is absolutely taking off. The U.S. is projected to add more than 18 gigawatts of new utility-scale battery storage. Just last year, 2025, huge record number, 11 gigawatts in 2024. By the end of 2026, the assumptions were nearly 65 gigawatts of total storage capacity. And the majority of new solar projects in the Western Interconnection area now include co-located storage. Battery costs have dropped dramatically in the last couple of years, and transmission expansion connects regions experiencing different weather patterns, improving reliability and lowering costs for everyone. delivering the grid of the future, delivering the interconnected, flexible, diversified grid of the future. Meanwhile, what's the alternative? Well, Winter Storm Fern, January 2026, coal plants ramped up as expected, but fuel prices spiked. Stockpiles dropped to their lowest levels in years, and the system was strained. We know that gas infrastructure can freeze. We know that peaker plants can be overstressed. We know that fossil fuels are not immune from failure. Reliability comes from diversification and modernization, not by clinging to a single fuel. Next, I hear that clean energy can't meet growing demand. That's not true either. Electricity consumption hit a record high last year and is projected to continue rising in 2026, according to EIA. AI-driven data centers, I think we all know, are a major contributor, with electricity demand from data centers expected to double by 2030. Clean energy is the fastest resource to deploy. So not only is it cheapest, but it's fastest to deploy. The average solar project can be built in 15 to 17 months. A natural gas plant often takes 4 years or longer. Gas turbine shortages mean new turbines may not be available until the 2030s. Solar and wind growth outpaced global demand growth in the first half of 2025, with solar alone meeting 83% of global electricity demand growth in the first half of 2025. If we are serious about meeting rising demand and doing so affordably, we must accelerate the most affordable and fastest to deploy resources, which also happen to be the cleanest resources. Next, I want to talk about data centers and fairness. Data centers are expanding dramatically, and utilities are investing billions of dollars in transmission upgrades. For example, in PJM, $4.3 billion in transmission costs associated with data center growth were passed to ratepayers. An additional $7.3 billion in increased generation costs were recorded. Without guardrails, households and small businesses are subsidizing infrastructure where trillion-dollar companies are making the money. That's why I'm proud that our Energy Bills Relief Act includes protections for consumers to ensure that data centers pay for their own grid updates. It incentivizes clean, zero-emission electricity use to reduce overall system costs and pollution. We need to make sure that as growth continues, that ratepayers are not stuck with the bill while trillion-dollar corporations reap all the benefit. Now, I want to turn close to my home for just a second and talk about wildfires and, in particular, California. California's electricity rates have gone up since the mid-2000s, no question about that, and that's despite the fact that we have led in energy efficiency. Wildfire mitigation and grid hardening are now 16% of total utility costs, 16%. Ratepayers in California have borne more than $27 billion in wildfire-related costs just between 2019 and 2024. Investor-owned utilities have passed on bankruptcy settlements and infrastructure upgrades tied to wildfire liability, and they have stuck it to the ratepayer. That's why blaming renewable energy for rate increases doesn't tell the picture. They're wildfire-driven. These are simply misrepresented facts by those who have a grudge against renewable energy. So, the Energy Bills Relief Act includes a grant program to support grid upgrades that would reduce wildfire risk, that would prevent catastrophic utility failures, lowering long-term ratepayer burdens. Next, I want to talk about LNG exports and volatility. As LNG exports increase, domestic natural gas prices increasingly reflect international demand. Global volatility becomes domestic volatility. Wind and solar, on the other hand, have no fuel price. They have no geopolitical premium. They have no shipping constraints. When you build renewable generation, the fuel is free forever. The fuel is free forever. That's a big deal. That's long-term price stability. So, what would our bill do? Very proud of a lot of the things that it would accomplish. Number one, it would rescind the tax hike on low-cost clean energy, and it would restore tax credits for clean energy, such as those in the Inflation Reduction Act. Number two, it would reverse roadblocks to clean energy permitting and restrict the abuse of Department of Energy emergency orders. Number three, it would ensure that data centers pay their fair share. Number four, it would expand LIHEAP and weatherization assistance to help struggling families. Number five, it would protect natural gas markets from international volatility. Number six, it would build a nationally interconnected grid to improve affordability, reliability, and resilience. And most importantly and lastly, it would share the economic benefits of clean energy with host communities. It's a good bill. It's one that we've worked on for a long time, and we're going to get as much support as we can. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you. I'd like to yield now to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramanian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank everyone here today, as well as thank SEEK for all their hard work and leadership. One of the things the president said last night, he's doing so much to lower energy costs through drill, baby, drill, and through all the other actions he's taken. I think on the campaign, he said he was going to lower energy prices by 50%, and yet last year, Americans paid more than 13% for their electricity bills compared to the previous year. And the big reason is that the big ugly bill added about $250 billion to Americans' energy bills by picking energy favorites and slowing down new technology. And so energy prices continue to rise for Americans. But something the president said is that the data centers will help lower Americans' energy costs. And one of the assumptions there is that they will pay for their own energy infrastructure and essentially not shift that burden to Virginians and Americans. Because in Virginia, we're facing an additional 9% increase in energy costs this year, and data centers are a big part of that. They consume about 25% of the energy, and could be more soon, could be up to 40%. And last year, more than $4.3 billion in transmission infrastructure costs for data centers were passed on to ratepayers. And so, this pledge, basically the president is asking for technology companies building data centers to pledge to build their own energy infrastructure along with their data centers moving forward and not shift the costs to ratepayers. And I welcome the idea of making sure that ratepayers aren't shouldering the burden of energy infrastructure and energy generation, because the American people deserve better than that. And I think one of the things I'd like to see more of is, rather than a pledge, a concrete proposal, actual regulatory frameworks that will protect people's energy costs. That's what we're doing in Virginia. Down in Richmond, there's now a legislation that they're moving forward to essentially make sure that ratepayers aren't paying for the energy generation of data centers. And so I look forward to having this bipartisan conversation, but I know that if the president doesn't come up with this framework that we need, then it's going to be another promise made, promise not kept when it comes to energy prices. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, and I'd yield now to the gentle lady from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur.
I wish to thank Congressman Casten for his great leadership, and also Congressman Mike Levin for drawing us together here today. And I rise today, as I do every day, on behalf of the people of the region I represent, but also for people across our country. Americans are facing the cost of energy, and it's becoming unaffordable, but it's not their fault. At the same time, many federal incentives to help lower energy costs and to create the new energy systems for the future have been rolled back by the current administration. Actually, I was somewhat surprised that that happened. America's grid is old. I hope President Trump hears this, and it's under greater strain. Our country actually set new records twice this past July for peak electricity demand. It's getting hotter in many parts of the country during the summer months, and for those of us who live up north, let me tell you, it's getting colder. And the old grid system is being tested like never before by hotter weather and cooler weather, cold weather, frigid weather, and higher usage. And when the grid strains, costs rise. Every household, I would venture in our country, is feeling the pinch. And for us in the upper Midwest, it isn't 9% increase. Our energy bills have doubled. In Ohio, rapid demand growth from big tech data centers are also pushing up energy costs before the public. The people that live in these areas can even catch the wind, that they can actually try to figure out and have meetings and say, hey, wait a minute, what can we do about this? Because their prices are doubling across our state and region. Families notice the increase. One constituent even told me her family's bill increased from $230 a month to $494 in July. That is huge increase. This increased cost spiral in energy is simply not sustainable. The majority party and the Department of Energy, meanwhile, under the current administration, are rolling back energy investments in America's future to help lower costs. I represent the most important domestic solar manufacturer, First Solar. I don't take money from them. I don't own their stock. But what they have done for America, 10% of our energy production in this country is now renewable and energy savings. We're smarter. We're smarter than we were 50 years ago. Our nation must invest faster in modern infrastructure when an all of the above energy strategy to truly become energy independent in perpetuity. I see many younger people in the gallery. For those of you who are a little bit techie and you care about the future of the country, help us become energy independent within our own shores, and to do so in a way that doesn't damage the environment. Just this last year, there were 354 clean energy projects or companies that the new administration canceled new projects, delaying new investment. We've seen layoffs of workers across our country because these projects lost federal funding. In my district, one of the lodestar companies I represent, called Libby Glass, Toledo, Ohio is the glass center of the world, the administration took away over $40 million that was going to help them. This was legislation Congress passed, that the administration signed the bill. It was vetted by the agencies and so forth to help them save energy so that they could compete with glass against China, France, Mexico, where workers are paid less and product is dumped on the global markets. When we don't invest in companies and the jobs they create for the American people, we shoot ourselves in the foot. And there's no question over 173,000 clean energy jobs actually have been eliminated between President Trump's election and swearing in and February of this year. Think about that. That was building the future for our country. And the 10 top states that have lost the most jobs from this misguided assault on clean energy are the following: Texas, Massachusetts, Arizona, New Jersey, Michigan, New York, South Carolina, Illinois, North Carolina, and my home state of Ohio. And it's interesting to me that 3 of the members that are on the floor now are from Illinois, Mr. Casten, Mr. Levin from California, and myself from Ohio. So we understand what these budget cuts mean, and while at the national level, the rise in energy rates is affecting people in every single state in our union. For my own district, the prices have doubled. Every family in the country knows what's happening. It's time for the executive branch to wake up. Meanwhile, China isn't asleep. It's investing in record levels in terms of energy development, making its products more competitive worldwide. President Trump said he was going to fix this, and he's done completely the opposite. He did hint last night about something dealing with new energy investments and these AI terminals that are being, and centers that are being built across the country. I hope he follows through. The American people certainly deserve better, and we need to stand up for affordability, not abdication. That sends our country backward. And I want to thank, Mr. Speaker, Congressman Casten and Congressman Levin and others who've spoken this today, this afternoon, in order to stand up for the American people and help them manage their budgets. And energy is such a central account in every single family's budget. Thank you for your leadership on this, and thank you for giving us a roadmap to lower America's energy bills. I yield back.
Thank you. I now yield again to Mr. Levin from California.
Thank the gentleman, and I certainly thank my good friend from Ohio, Marcy Kaptur, from whom I've learned so much on the Appropriations Committee and otherwise. Look, this debate should not be partisan, and it does not have to be partisan. The physical laws of energy do not care who's in the majority. The economics of electricity do not change with one party label or which district you're from. The grid does not ask whether the power flowing through it came from a red state or a blue state. We really need to answer only one question. Is there power when it's needed at a price families can afford? That's why this ought to unite us. Republican and Democratic states alike lead in wind and solar generation. Red and blue districts alike host clean manufacturing. Farmers earn steady lease payments from solar panels and wind turbines that help keep their family farms afloat through droughts and floods and commodity swings. Veterans and skilled tradespeople are building the advanced technologies that strengthen our energy security and reduce our dependence on volatile fuel markets. This is an American project happening in every region across every map. So the choice before us is simple. Do we want to play politics with the energy system that powers our economy, or do we want to win the future? Because the truth is, families do not experience energy policy as ideology. They experience it as a bill. They experience it as a choice between paying the utility bill and paying for groceries. They experience it as small business owners deciding whether to hire or to cut hours. They experience it as seniors on fixed incomes turning down the thermostat and hoping the next heat wave doesn't last too long. That's what energy affordability means in real life. And right now, energy bills are higher. Too many jobs have been put at risk or pushed offshore. Too many families have been stretched thinner. Too many communities are being asked to subsidize decisions that protect the incumbent energy players instead of protecting consumers. Look, we can keep doing what we've been doing, restricting the cheapest new supply, forcing ratepayers to carry the cost of uneconomic fossil fuel plants, and letting the infrastructure needs of trillion-dollar tech companies get passed down to households. We can keep pretending that the answer to every 21st century challenge is the same 20th century playbook. We can cling to the past and see the costs rise across the country for the average person. Or we can do what responsible leaders do. We can modernize and we can compete. We can build the grid that matches the economy that we actually have, not the economy that we used to have. We can expand transmission so that power can move to where it's needed. We can deploy storage so reliability is stronger in heat and cold and storms. We can make cost allocation fair so households aren't paying for private infrastructure that should be borne by the companies that profit from it. We can strengthen resilience against wildfires and extreme weather so ratepayers are not trapped in a cycle of catastrophic costs. And we can do what markets are already trying to do, scale the lowest cost electricity available. Because here's what cannot be debated away with partisan politics. Clean energy is the lowest cost new energy in America. Clean energy is the fastest path to stabilizing energy bills. Clean energy is how we meet rising demand without squeezing households. Clean energy is how we compete with China rather than handing them the supply chain of the future. Clean energy is how we reduce volatility because sunshine and wind do not spike in price when global markets panic. And that is why the question is not whether clean energy wins. It is already winning in every market that allows fair competition to function. The question is whether America leads. Will we lead in building the industries that power the next generation of manufacturing? Will we lead in the technologies that make the grid more reliable, not less reliable? Will we lead in protecting consumers rather than protecting entrenched interests? Will we lead in an energy system that is affordable, resilient, and secure? History is not going to remember who had the better slogan. History, I think, will remember in this moment whether this body decided to make America more competitive or more brittle. It'll remember whether we chose the future when the future was still a choice. That's what the Energy Bills Relief Act is designed to do. It's about families first. It's about consumers. It's about fair markets. It's about building, and it's about winning. Mr. Speaker, I hope we don't argue too much about yesterday, and I hope we focus instead on building tomorrow. And with that, I'll yield back to my dear friend from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. So as we prepare to close, I want to talk a little bit about how the Energy Bills Relief Act fits into the broader conversation we're having about energy permitting right now. And to do this, I want to just ask you to consider that you saw someone on TV who said the reason we don't have a lot of houses in America is because of the permitting barriers to building houses out of straw. Now, you'd probably have two thoughts. The first is, who the heck wants to build a house out of straw? And the second thought you might have is, what little pig is behind this advocacy campaign? Now, I tell you that because you've got to look at what is happening in the energy sector right now among those in the fossil fuel industry who are telling you that the permitting problem we have is a difficulty deploying fossil fuel assets. Let's look at some numbers. In the year 2010, the United States consumed 1.1 billion short tons per year of coal. 1.1 billion. Today, we consume about 500 million. That's a more than 50% drop in the amount of coal our country is consuming. In the year 2000, the United States consumed about 20 million barrels of oil per day. Today, we consume about 20 million barrels of oil per day. We drive more miles, we've got more people, and yet we're consuming the same amount of oil. Our houses are just as well lit, just as warm, and yet we're consuming half as much coal. How do we get to that point? Well, the reason we got to that point is because vehicles got more efficient. Given the choice between driving a car that costs you $40 to fill it up and one that costs $20, people prefer 20. 100 versus 50, people prefer 50. Heck, if you got an electric vehicle, you don't have to pay at all, especially if you got a solar panel on your roof. People like not paying for energy. The other way that happened is that the fastest growing source of new energy in this country has been renewable energy. We now generate more power from non-hydro renewable than we do from all the coal plants in the country. That's not because we got woke, it's because we got greedy. It's because markets said, I want to build the cheap stuff, and consumers wanted to benefit from that cheap stuff. So now step back and say, okay, what do you do if you are a fossil fuel company who is selling something that is losing market share? There's a new technology coming out that's eating into your customer base. You can't sell as much. Well, they've done two things. Number one, they have shifted to exports. 2016, the United States basically didn't export any natural gas at all. By 2021, we were exporting 300,000 million cubic feet per year. Today, we're over 500,000 million cubic feet per year. It's as if we invented cell phones and then decided to double down on exporting rotary phone technology to the rest of the world. Oil, we're still producing a lot of oil in the United States, but oil is increasingly also an export play. Well, if there's a permitting problem that's blocking our ability to produce and distribute oil and gas, how is it that it's so easy to get it down to the Gulf Coast and ship it out and sell it to overseas? The truth is, it ain't that hard. The reason why we're having this conversation about permitting is really, really simple. Half of the businesses in this country, by definition, are below average. A competitive market does not reward below average businesses. And so now we find ourselves with a position where energy industry participants that historically made sure that we kept our lights on, made sure that our cars could drive, made sure that our homes were warm, they built the economy that we have, and we are grateful to them. They are now losing market share, and instead of pivoting to providing people with the technologies they want, They are, number one, shifting to exports to try to go places that are not blessed with the kind of competitive capitalistic markets that we have in the United States. And number two, they are doing everything they can to ask people in this body to please prevent capitalism from eating my lunch because I cannot compete in a competitive market. That's what's going on. The reason why we're spending this time talking so much about costs and energy is because we have this amazing opportunity right now that we can have our cake and eat it too. When we embrace clean energy, we are embracing affordable energy. When we embrace consumers, we're embracing competition. To turn against those is to turn against capitalism. It's to turn against everything that ever truly made America great. It's to turn against the things that have kept up. And then you ask, how much farther could we go? And I'll give you some crazy statistics. The United States total GDP divided by the total amount of energy that the United States uses, we generate about $200 of GDP per million BTU of primary energy. The United Kingdom generates almost 350 million BTUs, almost twice as much as we generate. The Danes generate over 500. Their economies are vastly more efficient at turning energy into wealth than the United States is. Vastly more, like twice as efficient. Imagine if we were so bad at turning labor into wealth as our competitors. We'd be having a crisis about why is American labor so uncompetitive. Imagine if you were running a business that did a terrible job at turning capital into wealth and we were earning terrible returns on investment in the United States economy. We'd be having a crisis. We should be having a crisis about the fact that we have done such a horrible job at turning energy into economic activity. And we can be depressed about that, or we can be enormously optimistic at the opportunity we have in front of us. We don't have a lot of time to prevent massive ecological disaster from climate change. But we do have a way to move forward to avert that crisis and make us stupidly rich. My God, let's move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing us the time. Thank you to Congressman Levin, Congresswoman Kaptur, Congressman Subramanian, and for goodness sake, let's move forward, and I yield back.
The chair reminds members not to refer to persons in the gallery.